Hello and welcome to Green Belts at Home. Today we are going to tie-dye with natural dyes. And before we start, I just want to go over some of the things we need in order to do that. So actually the first thing we're going to use is some gloves. Some of the materials we are going to be using can either dye your hands or they might be a little bit caustic, so we want to protect our hands. Second thing we need is fabric. So using a natural fabric like cotton or wool is going to be the best bet. It won't really take on something like polyester or a polyester blend or rayon. Any synthetic fabrics really aren't going to work for this process. So we have our fabric. We're also going to need a pot, and we are not using this pot for anything else, only for dyeing. So once we use this pot for dyeing, don't use it to cook in. It's not really safe. And the pot we're using is going to be stainless steel or glass or ceramic. If you use aluminum, the metals in the aluminum could change the color of your dyes. So we want a stainless steel pot that's only used for dyeing. We're going to clean our fabric with something called soda ash or washing soda. You can find this online or you can get it in your supermarket in the laundry section. And this I found in Stop and Shop, so it's not too hard to find, but it's usually on the bottom, a little bit hidden away. So, but if you can't find it in the supermarket, you can get it online. We are going to be using something called alum, and that is our mordant, and that's a little bit harder to find. You can find it occasionally in the spice section because it is something that's used for pickling, but you're probably going to have to get this online. So it's A-L-U-M, alum. We're going to need that. We need a cutting board and a knife to cut up our materials. We're going to need either salt or vinegar, and these are going to be used as a fixative. Again, similar to the mordant, helps the dye stick to the fabric. And then we need our materials. So this is some of the things I'm going to be using to dye. So you can use avocado pit and avocado skins, which will actually give you a pink brown color. I have turmeric, which some of you may not be familiar with, but you can find this in some of the supermarkets here on Staten Island. I found this in ShopRite, so it is available. If you can't find it in the root, you can find it in the powder. So it's turmeric, it's a spice. These are some walnuts, and you may have seen these in our park once in a while if you're close to a walnut tree. And the hulls of the walnut will dye your fabrics and also your fingers a nice dark brown. We have some beet juice. I don't know if you guys can see it, which will give us a pink. And I think we have some wine berries, but you can also use raspberries or any other kind of berries that you find. Blueberries would work too. Try and use just the skins with the blueberries, but any berry would probably work and give you some different colors. If you don't want to do any of these processes, if it's too much work, you can always get your synthetic dye. So this is the one that we use when we are doing our summer camp tie-dyeing. It's called Procyon. There's many different kinds of tie-dyes you can use, but this is one that I recommend. With this one, the only other thing you need to do is clean it with your washing soda. So that'll be the only other thing you really need for the other tie-dye if you want to do synthetic. And I think that's about it. The only other thing we will need is tubs to put the dye in so we can dye our fabrics overnight. So let's get to it. Hi, okay, so now we are going to scour our fabric, and what that means is we're just going to clean it really, really good. So even if you have something that's brand new, it might have particles from the factory it came from, it might have some dirt on it, so you want to get this as clean as possible so the dye can stick to it. So what we're going to use to do that is something called soda ash or washing soda, which you can find either online or you can find it in the supermarket. I think I got this one in Stop and Shop. So it is out there. It's a little bit hard to find. It'll be with your detergents and laundry products. So what I'm going to do is I have about a little bit over a gallon of water here, and I'm just going to add 2 or 3 tablespoons of washing soda to my pot. Okay, and I'm going to let that dissolve. Stir it up. And my water is a little bit warm already, so it's dissolving pretty quickly. And then I'm going to add my fabric. So we are just using these little swatches, not a big t-shirt or anything like that. So if you're using something bigger than what I'm using, you're going to need a bigger pot. So just adjust it. If you need 2 gallons, add a little bit more washing soda. If you need 3 gallons, a little bit more. So I'm just putting that in here. We're going to bring it to a simmer, not a boil, and then we're going to let it simmer for about an hour. You can do it for 2 if you really want it clean. If you don't want to do it on the stove top, you can use your soda ash and a little detergent with no smells, no fabric softener, nothing like that. And really hot water in your washing machine and let it run through the washing machine. But this is going to get your fabrics a little bit cleaner than using it in the washing machine. Now we're ready to tie our fabric. We've washed it in the soda ash and gotten it nice and scoured and clean, and it's ready to be tied. So after we tie it, we are going to put it in the mordant. And throughout most of this process, you should try and keep your fabric wet. You don't want to dry it anytime. If it does dry out, just moisten it, put it into a tub of water with nothing else before you do the next step. So our first pattern we're going to do is a stripe. So if you want your stripes going vertical, that's how you're going to put your rubber bands. If you want your stripes going horizontal, you're going to put your bands that way. But you're going to fold in the opposite direction. So I'm going to do my stripes vertically, but I'm going to fold it horizontally. So we're going to fold it like we're folding a fan. And you can make this as wide as you want or as narrow as you want. As you can see, there's a little bit of dye on the fabric already, and you can see my fingers are yellow. And that's because I didn't use my gloves like I told you guys to do, but I didn't use my gloves when I was making my turmeric dye. So I have a little bit of yellow on there, but that's going to be okay. So once you have it folded, as I said, the way you put your rubber bands, that's the direction your stripes are going to go in. And you can do these as close together or far apart as you want. So you want your rubber bands to be pretty tight because that's going to prevent the dye from getting onto the fabric. So you want them pretty tight. And let's see. I'm going to do them about this far apart. So that is our vertical stripe, and we're going to put that aside till we're ready to put it in the mordant. The next one we'll do is pretty easy to do. This will give you a spiral shape. So what we're going to do is pinch it right into the middle of where you want the central part of your spiral. So you can do several of these on your product, or your project rather, or you can just do one big spiral. So I'm going to do one big spiral. And as you're spiraling it, try to pleat the fabric. So it's just a matter of twisting and then getting those folds. It doesn't have to be perfect. It will come out even if it's not perfect. And what you'll have is a small circle. And the way you're going to put your rubber bands is across this way, kind of like a pizza, across that way, and as many as you need. The rubber bands aren't really going to make too much of a difference, but you do want it to be tight. So this is pretty good. Again, it doesn't really matter too much where you put the rubber bands, unlike this one, where that's going to keep the make the stripes. But you do want it to be tight, and you don't want it to cover up too much. So we're going to leave it like that. Put it aside. And then the next one we're going to do is circles. So this pattern is going to give you like a bullseye effect as opposed to the other one, which is a spiral. So what we're going to do, again, pinch right in the middle of where you want that bullseye center, and you're just going to pull it up like so. So you have like a little ghost happening here. And then you're going to put your rubber bands where you want the circle, well, the white part of the circle to be. So, and it depends on how many rings you want in that. It depends on how many rubber bands you put there. So. So that's what it should look like when you're done. The next one we're going to do is actually going to be a V. So it's very similar to the stripe that you did before, but instead of doing it directly across the fabric like that, we're going to fold the fabric in half. So anytime you fold your fabric in half and make a design, you'll have a mirror image on that fabric. And instead of folding in a fan like that, we are going to fold it on a diagonal. So let me try and get this flattened out. So that is the V. And the last one we're going to do is the easiest. I think I need a few more rubber bands. You could also do this with string if you wanted to. And this one is the easiest to do if you really don't want to think about it too much. You're just going to crumple it up into a ball. All right, and this will give you a very random pattern. You don't know what you're going to get. Kind of fun. And you can do this with anything. Now, the pieces that you're going to use, if you do a t-shirt or something like that, you're going to have a much bigger piece of fabric, so you probably will need more rubber bands or more string. And again, with this pattern, it doesn't really matter too much where you put the rubber bands. It just matters that it's tight. But not too tight, because as you can see, rubber bands break pretty easy. So those are the few. There are many different designs you can find online, and you can just use your imagination. So now we're going to make our dye. So here I have some walnuts, and you can see already it's dyeing the bag a little bit brown. So with the walnuts, what I'm going to do is just take a hammer in the bag and smash it, which is kind of fun. That was really loud. All right. And we're going to try and break this up as much as possible, and then we can boil it, actually not boil it, simmer it for about an hour in water, which you can add some salt to, which will act as a fixative. So that's our walnuts. I also have the avocado, which again will give us like a pink color. So the seed is really hard. I would do it the same way as I did the walnut hulls and not try to really cut that with a knife. You might hurt yourself. They're slippery and they're very hard to cut. So we can smash that, but we can cut these up. And try to cut things up as small as you can, just so you can get all of the color out of it. So that's not as small as it could be, but then we can do the turmeric. Again, we're gonna cut it up as small as we can. I'm wearing gloves, especially with the walnuts, because they will dye your fingers. Not so much with the avocado, but. So we're gonna cut this up, and you can see how bright orange yellow that turmeric is inside. Again, if you can't find it, you can just go to the supermarket and get the powder, and the powder will work just as well. You almost make like a tea out of it. So what I'm going to do with these, I will boil them again with salt or some vinegar, or both if you'd like, and maybe simmer it for about an hour or until you get the color that you want. Then you're gonna cool it and strain it, and that will be your dye. And that's what you're gonna soak your fabric in. So we'll go on to the next step, which is doing the mordant on the fabric. So now that we've tied our shirts or our swatches up, we are going to put them into water on a pot with something called mordant. So the mordant I'm using is an alum, and these are usually some type of metal salts. You can use copper, iron, this one is aluminum, and these will help to actually bind the color to the fabric. So this is a chemical reaction, and I'm just going to put about 2 big tablespoons into my pot here. You can also add a little cream of tartar, which is another thing that you can get in the spice aisle. The mordant is really hard to find, so you will have to go online to find that. It's called alum, A-L-U-M. And again, you only need about 2 tablespoons per gallon. And you're gonna simmer this for about a half an hour. You could do it for maybe up to an hour, and then cool it down. And then once this is settled, you're not gonna rinse it, you're gonna put it right into your dye. Make sure you put it into the dye wet. You don't want it to dry out, otherwise you'll get a very weird mottled color. So now I'm going to put my fabric into our dyes, and here you can see I have our walnut dye. Remember earlier I was smashing those walnuts, and I boiled this for about a half an hour with a little salt, and then strained out all of the walnuts. This one is beet juice, and for a fixative we're using vinegar on this one. Vinegar is a good fixative for berries and stuff like that, but we used it in our beet juice. Here we have our avocado. I don't know if you want to come in and look. You get like almost like a pinkish yellow or a pinkish brown. And then we have our turmeric. So again, these were all boiled for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then strained. And each one has salt in it except for the beet juice, which has vinegar. And as you can see, I've had my little swatch here for about maybe 2 hours today. So we'll see how that comes out. I'm going to leave all of these overnight. And you can also see I am wearing my gloves this time. Let's see, I'll put a couple in each one. And you want to make sure you have enough dye that it covers it. This one I'll probably add a little water to because it's not fully covering that. So we'll put a couple in the walnut because it's nice and dark. Okay. And the only one I haven't made so far is the wineberry, so we'll see how that comes out when that's done. So we're gonna leave these overnight, at least. Leave them at least an hour, no less than that, otherwise they won't really take, but overnight would be a better idea. So we'll see it tomorrow morning and see how the dye came out. So it's the next day and our dyes have sat overnight, and you can see here I have turmeric, which came out really bright yellow, and the walnut, which is dark brown. I have already rinsed out the other dyes, which I'll show you later. But what you're going to do now is just rinse it in cold water. You don't want to lose all your dye. The color is going to fade a little bit when you rinse, so you'll see that. But this turmeric came out really bright yellow, which I'm very happy about. this is the circles that we did. You're going to give it a quick rinse. And then you're just going to let it dry. So you can see the circle pattern in there. And then we're going to do, I think this is the V pattern with the walnuts. So I think these two came out pretty nice. And again, there's the V. This probably is our best results, which I really like the way that came out. So now we're going to bring these over to dry and see what the other ones look like. Okay, so we have all of our tie-dye that we did with our plant material here. So if you want to come take a closer look, these are my two walnuts. We just looked at this one. So this was the V pattern that we did. This one was the scrunch pattern that I just wrapped up into a ball. These two are my turmeric, and I think I actually put our rubber bands on a little bit too tight. So you can see a little bit of a spiral pattern here, but the dye didn't get deep into this piece of cotton. So maybe I would leave it a little bit looser than what I did. Here you can see the circles, almost like a bullseye. And these are turmeric again. And then over here we have beet juice, which actually came out almost brown. I was expecting more of a pink, and it came out very light. I think maybe if you use a different type of mordant, you'll get a better color on that. But our avocado pit and skins came out a little bit more pink than the beet juice, which was kind of interesting. But you can see it's like a peachy color. And this was our vertical stripes, and these were our horizontal stripes. And then one that came out really nicely, and I didn't do any tie-dyeing on this, was our wineberry, which came out a really pretty pink color. So you could probably do the same with raspberries and get the same results. But you can find raspberries in our park. Wineberries in our park. And they are invasive, so it's not going to do too much harm to pick a few for your dyes. So when you're doing a project with these types of dyes, don't put them into the washing machine afterwards. Hot water and harsh detergents will probably take most of your dye out. I would suggest only using cool water and hand washing, and maybe a very light detergent like Woolite or something like that. So we hope you guys had a chance to do this activity at home, and we'd love to see your creations. So if you would like to take a picture of what you've come up with, you could send those to us at sigreenbelteducation@gmail.com. And you can also go onto our website, sigreenbelt.org, and look up a list of different types of materials that you can use, some of which I haven't used today. So we hope to see you soon, and thanks for joining us.